Have you ever stood at a crossroad in your life, uncertain of which path to take, even when everything around you seems to be falling into place? The weight of doubt clouds your mind, and you begin questioning, why can't I see it? Why is it so hard to move forward? What if I told you that the way is already right in front of you? What if I told you that God has already shown you the path, but you've been looking in the wrong direction this whole time? What if the solution to all your struggles has been right there in plain sight, but the distractions of the world and the chaos of your heart have kept you from seeing it? It's easy to feel lost. We all do at times, but what if this moment is not about finding the way, but about seeing it in the way God has already revealed it to you? The truth is, God's plan isn't hidden. It's just that we often look in places that don't align with His will. We look for answers in places of confusion, through struggles, or even in things that seem right, but are not truly aligned with His voice. And right now, God is calling you to stop, breathe, and ask yourself, am I looking in the right direction? This journey you're on, it's not just about finding a way forward. It's about realizing that the way has already been shown to you. It's just waiting for you to see it clearly. God is speaking to you right now, and His direction for you is more evident than you might realize. To walk this journey fully and hear the call that's been placed upon your heart, I invite you to like this video, subscribe, and leave a comment with the phrase, I'm hearing His voice. In doing so, you're not just engaging with this video, you're stepping into a sacred movement, a moment where your faith aligns with the greater purpose that has been prepared for you. Remember, commenting isn't just an act of engagement, it's a powerful declaration that you're ready to listen to what God is saying. And in doing this, you're not just growing in your own journey, but you're joining a community of others who are also listening, learning, and seeking the same transformation. Now that we've begun to understand that the way is right in front of us, let's pause for a moment and reflect on a story that speaks directly to this truth. The story of the Israelites as they wandered through the wilderness. God had already shown them the land of promise, yet they struggled to see it, constantly complaining and questioning His plan. It wasn't the wilderness that was their obstacle, it was their inability to see past their circumstances. They were looking in the wrong direction, focusing on the challenges instead of the promise. They were distracted by what was immediately in front of them, blinded to the fact that the way forward had already been laid out for them. How often do we do the same? How often do we allow our circumstances, our doubts, fears, and struggles to pull us away from the path God has already prepared? This isn't just a story from thousands of years ago, it's the story of your life today. How many times have you found yourself at a crossroads, unsure of the way forward, only to discover that God had been speaking all along? The wilderness is not a place where God is absent. It's a place where He calls us to trust, to listen, and to open our eyes to the way He's already shown us. Right now, you may be standing in your own wilderness, wondering where to go next. And while you look around for signs, the truth is, God's already been leading you. The promise is still alive, but it's up to you to take your eyes off the distractions and turn toward the path He's laid before you. If this spoke to you so far, write in the comments, I know He hears me. You're not just commenting. You're making a declaration that you hear the voice of God, and you're choosing to follow His direction, even when the road ahead isn't fully clear. We often find ourselves in situations that feel like a test. We may pray, ask for answers, and seek guidance, yet we still feel stuck, unable to discern God's will. It's a frustrating place to be, isn't it? And it's precisely in these moments that God's presence is more tangible than we realize. Consider the story of Moses. When he stood before the burning bush, God spoke to him in the most unexpected of ways. Moses was not looking for a sign. He was simply living his life, doing what he had always done. And yet, God interrupted that routine in a powerful way. He didn't need Moses to make the first move. God took the initiative, showing up when Moses least expected it. Just like Moses, we often miss the signs because we're looking in the wrong direction. We expect answers to come in one way, perhaps through loud, dramatic moments or clear visions, when in reality, God's voice is often gentle, subtle, and in the ordinary details of our lives. This is a call to stop waiting for the extraordinary. The way you're looking for might already be unfolding in front of you in ways you're not seeing. In the mundane, in the silence, God is speaking. The burning bush wasn't just for Moses. It's for you too. Will you stop to listen? How? Many times have you been given an opportunity that you let slip by because you weren't looking for it in the right way. Maybe God is waiting for you to stop, take a breath and listen. Write in the comments, "I'm hearing His voice," if you feel God speaking to you through the quiet moments of life. In the journey of faith, there are often moments when we feel like we've reached a dead end, when the doors are closed and we can't see beyond the immediate struggle. We pray, we hope, we even cry out for help, but there seems to be no response. It's in those moments of silence that God's presence is often the most powerful, yet the hardest to discern. But what if I told you that the silence is not God's absence? What if I told you that God is doing something profound in those moments of stillness, something that will change the trajectory of your entire life? Look at the story of Job. Job was a man who faced unimaginable loss, heartache, and suffering. He had everything taken from him, his wealth, his health, his family, and for what seemed like an eternity, God remained silent. His friends came, offering their well-meaning but misguided advice, and still God did not respond. Job's cries for help went unanswered for a long time. Now, imagine being in Job's shoes for a moment. Every part of him must have screamed for justice, for an answer, for God to speak. Yet what he didn't know in those moments was that God was working in the background, preparing something far greater than he could have ever understood at that time. Job's faithfulness in the silence, his unwillingness to curse God or abandon his faith, became the very foundation of his restoration. It wasn't just the restoration of his wealth or his health, but the restoration of his relationship with God. In his suffering, Job found something deeper than he had ever known before. The silence, though painful, was not a sign of God's absence. It was God's strategy. God was not distant. God was working on a plan so far beyond Job's understanding that it couldn't be revealed until the moment was right. Sometimes we want answers now. We demand them. We feel that if God truly loves us, He would answer our prayers immediately, take away our pain, and restore us to where we were before. But God's timing is different from ours. God's silence is an invitation. It's an invitation to trust deeper, to believe when there seems to be no way forward, and to surrender our need for immediate answers. Silence often feels like abandonment, but it is actually the deepest form of preparation. It's in these moments that God shapes our hearts, molds our character, and prepares us for the blessings that will come, but only when we are truly ready. Think about it. What if the reason you feel stuck is not because God has forgotten you, but because He's preparing you for something greater than you can imagine? We need to change our perspective on silence. Instead of seeing it as an absence of God's voice, we need to see it as a fertile ground for spiritual growth. In the silence, God is refining our faith, purifying our hearts, and strengthening our trust in Him. Every moment of waiting, every unanswered prayer is God's way of drawing us closer to Him, not pushing us away. There is a profound peace that comes when you understand that God's silence isn't a punishment or a sign of disconnection. It's the beautiful work of a loving Father who is preparing you for the fullness of His purpose for your life. When we can surrender in these silent moments, we open ourselves to a deeper relationship with God. one that doesn't rely on immediate gratification but is built on trust and intimacy. In your life, there may be situations right now that feel like they're dragging on without resolution. You've prayed, you've hoped, you've waited, but the answers haven't come yet. It's tempting to give up, to think that God is not listening. But I urge you to keep trusting even in the silence. God's plan is unfolding, even if you can't see it yet. If this message resonates with you, take a moment and write in the comments, "I know He hears me." Let your declaration of faith shine through the silence. The next part of our journey will help you understand how silence isn't just a place of waiting, it's a place of deep transformation. When we truly listen in the quiet, God often reveals more than we could have imagined. As we continue on this spiritual journey, we begin to understand that our relationship with God isn't just about the answers He gives. It's about the trust we place in Him in the midst of uncertainty. In fact, it's in those uncertain, uncomfortable moments that our faith can grow stronger than ever before. Let's dive deeper into the story of Abraham. Abraham's journey with God was marked by moments of great uncertainty. Imagine being told to leave everything you know, your family, your home, your security, and follow God to an unknown land. But the most striking moment came when God asked Abraham to sacrifice his son Isaac, the child of promise. Now this request would seem incomprehensible to anyone. It would shake anyone to the core. Yet in the midst of this unfathomable request, Abraham did not hesitate. He trusted God, even though he didn't understand why this was happening. He obeyed without having all the answers. What if God is calling you to a similar act of trust? What if He's asking you to let go of something precious in your life, something you've held on to tightly, for reasons that you may not yet understand? This is where faith moves beyond intellectual understanding and becomes a deep, soul-deep surrender. When God asks Abraham to sacrifice Isaac, it isn't just a test of obedience, it's a test of trust. It's a test of whether Abraham believes that even in the worst circumstances, God is still good, still faithful, and still in control. The most profound part of the story is not just Abraham's willingness to obey, it's the deep relationship he had with God. Abraham trusted God so deeply that he was willing to follow Him, even when the path didn't make sense. This kind of trust doesn't come easily. It comes from a history of walking with God, from seeing His faithfulness in the past and knowing that He will be faithful in the future. It comes from understanding that God doesn't ask us to walk through life without a purpose, even when we can't see the full picture. And just like Abraham, God may ask you to take a leap of faith, to step into the unknown, or to let go of something that has held a significant place in your heart. But this is where true transformation begins. It's only when we surrender our will to God's will that we experience the fullness of His plans for us. Perhaps you're facing a similar challenge right now. Maybe God is calling you to trust Him in a way you've never had to before. Maybe you're standing at the edge of the unknown, unsure of what lies ahead, and all you have is faith in the one who called you. I can tell you this, even when the path seems unclear, even when the direction feels uncertain, God's promise to you remains true. He will not leave you. He will not forsake you. But you must choose to trust, to take that step of faith, just as Abraham did. It's in this trust that we begin to see God's faithfulness in new and profound ways. Sometimes God asks us to take a step without knowing exactly where it will lead, but He promises that He will be with us every step of the way. And when we trust Him, when we move in faith, we experience a deeper intimacy with God than we ever could have imagined. So where in your life is God asking you to trust Him, even though you don't have all the answers? What step of faith is He calling you to take? Write in the comments, "I trust you, Lord." This declaration will help you release your fear and embrace his peace, trusting that he has a plan for you. And as we move forward in our journey, let's consider how trust in God doesn't just bring us through challenges, it transforms the way we see everything. It gives us the strength to face the unknown with hope and confidence. In the next part, we will explore how to hold on to this trust, even when the winds of life try to knock us down. Let's now turn our attention to one of the most powerful figures in the Bible, a man whose entire life is a testament to the strength that comes from trusting in God. I'm talking about Job. His story isn't just a tale of suffering, but rather a profound example of what it means to remain faithful when everything seems to be falling apart. Job's life was a picture of success, stability, and happiness. He was wealthy, had a beautiful family, and was known as a righteous man. But in a series of devastating events, everything was stripped away from him. His wealth vanished, his children died, his health deteriorated, and his friends, instead of comforting him, blamed him for his misfortunes. Job was left with nothing but his faith in God, and even that was tested to its very limits. What's striking about Job's story is not just the depth of his suffering, but his reaction to it. When tragedy struck, Job didn't lash out at God in anger. He didn't curse God or walk away in despair. Instead, in the midst of his grief, he uttered these words, "The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised." Job 1:21. Job's faith wasn't built on circumstances, it was built on his understanding of God's goodness and sovereignty. He didn't believe in God just because things were going well. He believed in God because of who God is, not because of what God does for him. This is a hard truth to swallow, but it's an essential one. True faith doesn't depend on whether life is going our way. True faith is rooted in the understanding that God is good, even when our lives are not. Job's unwavering trust in God, despite his losses, is an invitation for us to do the same. It challenges us to ask, can we trust God when our world falls apart? Think about it for a moment. When things go wrong, when life doesn't make sense, when God seems silent, what do? Do we question him? Do we turn our backs? Or do we stand firm in the belief that God is still God, even in the darkest of times? Job's story teaches us that it's possible to experience deep grief and yet still hold on to a deep and unshakable faith. His trust in God wasn't an act of blind obedience. It was the fruit of a relationship that had been cultivated over time. Job had spent years walking with God, and because of that, when the storms of life hit, his faith didn't crumble. Just like Job, we too may face seasons of suffering, loss, and confusion, and during those times it's easy to question God's presence or his goodness. But the truth is, God is always with us, even when we don't feel him. God doesn't abandon us in our pain. In fact, it's in our suffering that he draws closest to us, offering his comfort, his presence, and his peace. So, what about you? Are you in a season where things don't seem to be going your way? Are you struggling with a loss, a difficult situation, or unanswered prayers? This is the time to lean into God's faithfulness. This is the time to say, "Though he slay me, yet will I trust in him." Job 13:15. No matter what you're going through, know this: God's presence is real. His goodness is unchanging. And even in your suffering, he is working out something greater in your life. Take a moment to reflect. What areas of your life have been shaken by hardship? How can you, like Job, declare God's goodness even when everything else around you is falling apart? Write in the comments, "Even in the storm, I trust you, Lord." Let this declaration be a sign of your unwavering trust in God's plan for you. And as we continue this journey, let's take a look at how God works in the silence. In the next section, we will dive deeper into understanding why sometimes God remains silent and how to trust him even when we don't hear his voice. There are moments in our spiritual lives when God seems silent, distant, and unresponsive. We pray, we cry out, we seek, but we hear nothing in return. It's in these moments of silence that our faith is truly tested. And yet, as we reflect on this silence, we begin to realize that God's silence is not an absence of His presence, it is a strategy. Consider the story of Jesus' time in the wilderness. In Matthew 4:1, we read that Jesus was led by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. Now this seems like an odd thing for God to do. Why would the Spirit lead Jesus into a place of temptation and testing? Why would God remain silent when His Son needed strength the most? It's because sometimes God's silence is His way of refining us. When Jesus was in the wilderness, He was not abandoned by God. He was being prepared for the work ahead. God was allowing Him to endure the silence, the solitude, and the temptation to prepare Him for His ministry. Jesus emerged from the wilderness stronger, more focused, and more equipped to fulfill His divine purpose. God often works in silence because He knows that we need those moments to grow, to stretch, and to develop the kind of faith that is not dependent on immediate answers, but on trust in His greater plan. God does not always speak in the loud moments of life. Sometimes He speaks in the quiet, in the stillness, in the spaces where we feel as if we are alone. But it is in those quiet moments that we learn to trust in Him without conditions, without needing proof or immediate answers. In Psalm 46:10, God says, "Be still and know that I am God." In the stillness, we encounter God in ways that we could never experience if everything was always loud and chaotic. It is in the silence that we learn to surrender, to let go of our control, and to rest in His sovereignty. When we are faced with silence, we have a choice. We can panic, question, and try to force an answer, or we can choose to trust. We can believe that even when we don't hear Him, He is working behind the scenes, orchestrating every detail of our lives. Think about your own life. Have you ever experienced a season where it felt like God was silent? Maybe you prayed fervently, but nothing seemed to happen. Maybe you've asked for guidance, but felt lost in the silence. The key is to understand that God's silence is not an indication of His absence, but rather an invitation to trust Him more deeply. God is always speaking even when we don't hear Him with our ears. He speaks through His word, through the actions of others, through the gentle promptings of the Holy Spirit. But His silence teaches us something even deeper. It teaches us that our faith is not dependent on hearing from Him every moment. It's about trusting Him even when we don't understand what's happening. In the silence, God is often drawing us closer to Himself. He's teaching us to rely on His character, not just His voice. He's shaping our hearts, strengthening our faith, and preparing us for the next season of our lives. If you've ever struggled with God's silence, know that it is a common experience for those who walk in faith. But also know that this silence is not an end. It's a season of growth. God's silence can often be the prelude to something greater. Reflect on this. When has God's silence been a turning point in your faith? How has it shaped your trust in Him? Let us know. In the comments, "In the silence I trust you, Lord." This simple act of trust can unlock a deeper understanding of God's work in your life. And as we move forward, we will explore how silence can lead to profound revelations. In the next section, we will look at how God's silence often leads to moments of spiritual awakening and how these moments shape our future. As we continue this journey of discovering God's purpose through silence, it's important to recognize that silence often precedes some of the most profound revelations in our lives. The silence is not an end in itself. It's a sacred space where God does His deepest work in us, shaping us for the greater things to come. Consider the powerful story of Elijah in 1 Kings 19:11-12. After Elijah's mighty victory over the prophets of Baal, he found himself fleeing from Jezebel, fearful For his life, he sought refuge in a cave, exhausted and overwhelmed. And then God told him to stand on the mountain, for he was about to pass by. The wind came, violent and powerful, but God wasn't in the wind. After the wind, an earthquake shook the ground, but God wasn't in the earthquake. Then, after the earthquake, there was a fire, but God wasn't in the fire. But after the fire, there came a gentle whisper. And in that whisper, Elijah heard the voice of God. This moment is so powerful because it reveals a profound truth. God doesn't always speak in the loud, dramatic moments of life. He often speaks in the quiet, the gentle whisper, the moments when we are still enough to hear him. God was not in the thunder, the earthquake, or the fire. He was in the silence that followed. Elijah's story teaches us that when we are in a season of silence, we should not despair. It is in the silence that God can speak the clearest. The louder moments of life, the moments when everything is chaotic, when we're trying to control the storm, can drown out his voice. But it is in the stillness, when we let go of the noise and distractions, that we often hear God most clearly. Think about your own life for a moment. When have you felt overwhelmed by the noise and chaos around you? Have there been times when you've sought answers only to be met with silence? And yet in the silence, did you experience peace or a deep understanding that you couldn't explain? Perhaps the silence is God's way of inviting you to slow down, to cease striving, and to listen more carefully for his voice. Maybe he's calling you to move beyond your fear, your impatience, and your doubts, and to trust him to reveal his will in his time. Silence doesn't mean absence. It means God is working in ways we cannot yet see. In Isaiah 30:15, God says, "In repentance and rest is your salvation. In quietness and trust is your strength." When we stop striving, when we stop forcing answers, we make space for God's voice to come through clearly. In the quietness, we find strength. In the stillness, we find our salvation. Now reflect on this. Are you currently in a season of silence? What is God trying to teach you in this moment? How can you create space in your life for his gentle whisper to be heard? Take a moment to think deeply about this question and share your thoughts in the comments. In the stillness, I hear your voice, Lord. This simple declaration can be a powerful step toward understanding what God is doing in your life. As we move forward, we will explore how silence not only prepares us for God's revelation, but how it also helps us grow in faith, trust, and patience. There is a divine purpose in every silent season, and soon we'll discover the deep work God is doing within us. As we continue to reflect on the power of silence, it's essential to realize that God's silence is not just a moment of waiting, it's a transformative process. In these quiet seasons, God is cultivating within us something that cannot be rushed or forced, a deeper, more trusting relationship with him. The silence is meant to shape us, refine us, and prepare us for the next step in our journey. One of the most profound lessons we learn in times of silence is the development of patience. Patience is a fruit of the Spirit, and it's cultivated in the quietest of moments. It's easy to be patient when everything is going according to plan, when the answers are clear, and when God's voice is audible and unmistakable. But when God is silent, when the answers aren't coming fast enough, that's when our patience is truly tested. James 5:7-8 says, "Be patient then, brothers and sisters, until the Lord's coming. See how the farmer waits for the land to yield its valuable crop, patiently waiting for the autumn and spring rains. You too be patient and stand firm, because the Lord's coming is near." The farmer doesn't rush the harvest. He waits. He trusts the process. And in the same way, God invites us to wait with patience, knowing that he is working even when we can't see it. In our fast-paced world, where everything is immediate, silence can feel like a burden. We want answers now, we want solutions today, and we're conditioned to expect instant gratification. But in the kingdom of God, waiting is a sacred act. It's in the waiting, the trusting, and the patient endurance that we grow closer to Him. Think about the story of Abraham, who was promised by God that he would be the father of many nations. But Abraham had to wait for years, decades in fact, before the promise was fulfilled. There were times when he doubted, when he questioned God's timing, and even when he tried to take matters into his own hands. But in the end, God fulfilled His promise, and Abraham's faith was strengthened. Patience in the silence does not mean inactivity. It doesn't mean we sit idly by and wait for things to happen. It means that in the midst of waiting, we continue to trust God. We keep moving forward, doing what He has called us to do, even if we don't see the results right away. Just as a farmer trusts the process of the seasons, we must trust that God's timing is perfect. If you find yourself in a season of silence and waiting, this is the moment to reflect on how you can cultivate patience in your own heart. Are you willing to trust God, even when His silence feels overwhelming? Can you learn to wait with faith, knowing that His plans for you are greater than anything you can imagine? Take a moment now to reflect. How can you embrace patience in your current situation? What are some areas in your life where you need to surrender your need for immediate answers? Share your thoughts in the comments. In the waiting, I trust you, Lord. This is a declaration of faith, an acknowledgement that even in the silence, God is at work in your life. As we move forward, we will explore how this season of waiting and silence can ultimately lead to a deeper understanding of God's will for our lives. There is power in trusting God's timing, and in the next section, we will look at how our patience and trust lead us into greater revelation and clarity. In our journey of silence and waiting, one of the most significant revelations is that God's timing is never random. It's perfectly orchestrated. While we may struggle to understand why He remains silent, there's a divine purpose in His delay. What if I told you that the silence you're experiencing is not the absence of God, but the preparation for a greater revelation? Consider the story of Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead in John 11. When Lazarus was ill, his sisters, Mary and Martha, sent word to Jesus, hoping He would come and heal their brother. But Jesus delayed His arrival, even though He loved Lazarus. By the time He arrived, Lazarus had died, and the grief of those around Him was palpable. However, Jesus used this silence to reveal something far greater than physical healing. He showed His power over death itself. He revealed His divine authority in a way that no one could have anticipated. In the same way, God's silence often precedes a breakthrough. Just as Jesus waited before revealing His power, God often allows us to endure seasons of silence so that we can experience His greatest works in our lives. The silence is not a punishment, it's a setup for a greater demonstration of His glory. It's in the silence that our faith is tested and strengthened. It's in those moments when we feel the weight of uncertainty that God is preparing us for something beyond what we can imagine. In Psalm 27:14, David says, "Wait for the Lord. Be strong and take heart and wait for the Lord." Waiting on the Lord is not passive. It's an active choice to trust His character and His promises, even when we don't see the immediate results. It's trusting that His timing is perfect, even when we don't understand it. There is something powerful about waiting with a heart that believes God is at work, even when we can't see it. God's silence doesn't mean He's forgotten about you. It doesn't mean He's distant. In fact, silence is often God's way of inviting us to draw nearer. When everything else falls away, when the distractions fade, that's when we can hear His voice most clearly. Silence isn't about God withholding Himself. It's about God calling us to a deeper intimacy with Him. So, in this season of silence, how can you shift your perspective? Rather than viewing the silence as a sign of abandonment, can you see it as a sacred invitation to grow in trust, patience, and understanding. What might God be preparing you for in this moment? Take a moment to reflect. What is God teaching you in this silence? How can you lean into His presence even when you can't hear His voice as clearly as you'd like? I invite you to comment below. I will trust in your timing, Lord. This declaration is a powerful affirmation that, despite the silence, you are choosing to trust in the divine purpose of God's plan for your life. As we move forward, we'll explore the revelation that often follows silence, when God's purposes are made clear and His timing unfolds in ways that exceed our expectations. Get ready to discover how the silence is a precursor to a breakthrough that you've been waiting for. When we enter a season of silence, we often do so with a sense of uncertainty and even frustration. But as we've seen, this silence has a purpose. It's shaping us, refining us, and preparing us for something greater. And sometimes it's in that quiet waiting that God reveals His most profound truths. The silence is not the end of the story. It's the beginning of a deeper revelation. One of the most powerful aspects of silence is the way it deepens our trust in God's sovereignty. Trust is an essential ingredient in our walk with God, and it's often tested when we find ourselves in seasons of uncertainty. When we can't see what's ahead, when we don't know how things are going to unfold, that's when trust becomes the anchor for our souls. In Proverbs 3:5-6, we're reminded, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your path straight." This verse doesn't promise that we'll always have clear answers or that we'll always understand what's happening in our lives, but it does promise that if we trust in God with all our heart, He will guide us through the silence and lead us to the path He has prepared for us. The challenge in times of silence is learning to trust even when we don't understand. When we're in the middle of a season of waiting, it's easy to get anxious, to question God's plan, or to doubt that He's even listening to our prayers. But God's silence isn't a sign of His absence. It's often a sign that He's working behind the scenes, orchestrating everything in His perfect timing. Just as Jesus was silent in the face of His trial, we are called to trust God, even when the answers aren't clear, when the path ahead is obscured, and when we feel alone. The silence doesn't mean God is distant. It's in the silence that He draws us closer, teaching us how to trust Him more deeply. In the New Testament, we see the Apostle Paul, who went through seasons of deep silence and suffering, yet even in the midst of his trials, Paul found a deep peace and trust in God's purposes. In 2 Corinthians 12:9-10, Paul writes, "But He said to me, 'My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. For the sake of Christ, then, I am content with weaknesses, insults, hardships, persecutions, and calamities. For when I am weak, then I am strong.'" In the midst of suffering and silence, Paul discovered a profound truth, that God's power is most evident when we are weak, when we have nothing left to cling to but His grace. The silence, the waiting, and the suffering are all part of the process that strengthens our trust in God's power and sovereignty. As you reflect on your own season of silence, ask yourself, how can you deepen your trust in God? Are you willing to lean into His grace and trust that, even in the silence, He is working for your good? Take a moment now to reflect. What areas of your life do you need to surrender to God's timing and trust in His sovereignty? How can you shift your perspective from frustration to trust? If you feel led, share your thoughts in the comments. I choose to trust in your timing, Lord. This simple but powerful declaration reminds us that, even in the silence, we are choosing to believe that God is still in control. As we continue to explore the power of silence, we will see how it leads us into a deeper revelation of God's will and purpose for our lives. His silence is not a void. It is filled with the potential for transformation and breakthrough. The process of waiting in silence is not only a test of trust, but also an opportunity for growth. It is in the stillness that we learn patience, endurance, and surrender, qualities that shape us into who God has called us to be. But this growth doesn't happen automatically. It requires intentionality, a choice to embrace the silence and allow it to mold us into more faithful followers of Christ. In Romans 5:3-4, Paul writes, "Not only so, but we also glory in our sufferings, because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance, character, and character, hope." These words highlight the transformative power of waiting. The suffering we experience in silence, whether emotional, spiritual, or even physical, isn't meaningless. It has a purpose. It produces perseverance, which in turn refines our character and builds hope. When we are in a season of silence, it can feel as if time is standing still. We may wonder if we are stuck or if we are ever going to move forward. But the truth is, God is always at work, even when we can't see it. The waiting is a period of preparation. It's like a seed planted in the ground. At first you see no growth, no change. But beneath the surface, something is happening. Roots are growing deep and soon the fruit will emerge. Consider the process of a tree growing from a seed. The seed is planted in the ground, buried in darkness. It may seem as if nothing is happening, but beneath the surface the roots are taking hold. The tree is growing in silence. Over time, as the roots grow deeper, the tree begins to push through the soil, reaching towards the light. Eventually, it will bear fruit. But this process takes time. It cannot be rushed. In the same way, our spiritual growth often takes place in the unseen moments of silence. We may not always see the immediate results, but God is at work, deepening our roots of faith and preparing us for the next season. Just as the tree grows in silence, so too does our faith grow in the quiet spaces of life. It is during these seasons that we are being shaped and strengthened, even if we don't immediately see the outcome. James 1:3-4 encourages us to consider it pure joy whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. The silence, the trial, the waiting, it is all part of God's process to mature us. It is a refining fire that burns away the things that don't belong and leaves behind a faith that is pure and strong. As you reflect on your own journey, think about how God has used seasons of silence to refine you. Can you look back on times when you were waiting and see how they shaped your character and your faith? How has your perseverance grown in the quiet moments? Take a moment to pause and reflect. What areas of your life is God refining in this season of silence? How can you lean into this process and allow it to shape you into the person God is calling you to be? If this resonates with you, leave a comment below. I am being refined in the silence. By sharing this, we declare that even in the waiting, we are trusting God to use it for our growth and transformation. God is not wasting your silence. Every moment, every day that passes is an opportunity for you to grow deeper in faith, to build resilience, and to mature in your relationship with Him. In this season of silence, know that God is preparing you for something far greater than you can imagine. Trust the process and know that His timing is perfect. The silence we experience is also a powerful opportunity for intimacy with God. In the fast-paced world we live in, where distractions are endless and noise is constant, silence can be a gift. It allows us to draw closer to God in a way that is often impossible when we are surrounded by the clamor of life. It's in the silence that we can hear God's still, small voice, guiding us with His wisdom, comfort, and love. In 1 Kings 19:11-12, we find the story of the prophet Elijah who was seeking the Lord. He went to a mountain and witnessed a powerful wind, an earthquake, and a fire, but the Lord was not in any of them. Then, after the fire, came a gentle whisper. God was not in the noise, but in the stillness. This moment is a profound reminder that sometimes the most powerful encounters with God happen not in the loud, dramatic moments, but in the quiet and the stillness. God's voice is often heard in the silence, where we are able to tune in to what He is saying without the distractions of the world around us. When we enter into that space of quiet waiting, we create room for God to speak to us, to reveal His will for our lives, and to minister to our hearts. The silence becomes a place of deep connection, where our relationship with God is nurtured and strengthened. In these moments, it's not just about hearing God's voice, it's about being fully present with Him. Just as in any relationship, intimacy requires time, attention, and focus. When we are able to quiet our hearts and minds, we make space for God to fill us with His presence, His peace, and His love. The silence then becomes a sanctuary where we can commune with our Creator. Jesus modeled this for us throughout His ministry. He regularly withdrew from the crowds to spend time alone in prayer, seeking solitude in order to reconnect with His Father. In Mark 1:35 it says, "Very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where He prayed." Jesus understood the importance of silence and solitude in maintaining a close relationship with God. He knew that in the quiet moments, He would find the strength, wisdom, and clarity He needed to fulfill His mission. In our own lives, we can follow Jesus' example by seeking out moments of quiet solitude, where we can rest in God's presence and listen for His voice. Whether it's in the early hours of the morning, during a quiet walk, or in a place of retreat, these moments of silence are sacred opportunities for us to deepen our intimacy with God. As you reflect on your own life, consider, when was the last time you intentionally sought out silence to spend time with God? Have you created space in your day for stillness where you can be present with Him and hear His voice? Take a moment to pause and pray. Lord, help me to make space for You in the silence. Draw me closer to Your heart and teach me to listen for Your voice in the quiet moments. If you feel led, share a prayer or reflection in the comments. I choose to be still and know You, Lord. This simple act of reflection and prayer deepens our connection with God and opens our hearts to receive more of His presence. The silence is not a void, it's an invitation. It's an invitation to draw near to God, to hear His voice, and to be transformed by His presence. Embrace the silence and let it be a space where your relationship with God flourishes. Idresh Assad, every journey there comes a pivotal moment. The moment when everything shifts, when the truth is revealed, and when God's hand becomes unmistakably clear. In your journey, this moment is coming. You have been searching, praying, and hoping for a sign, but what if the very answer you seek has already been given? What if you've missed it, not because God is silent, but because you were not looking in the right direction? The reality is, we often overlook the most profound signs from God because we are looking for them in the wrong places. We expect grand gestures, thunderous voices, and dramatic revelations. Yet God often works in the quiet, in the seemingly ordinary, in the subtle moments that require us to slow down and pay attention. The divine truth is right before us, but we need to open our eyes to see it. In the Bible, there are numerous instances where God's revelation was not loud or dramatic. Take the story of the Apostle Paul. Before his conversion, Paul was known for his zealous persecution of Christians. He was on the road to Damascus, ready to capture more believers, when a light from heaven suddenly flashed around him. He fell to the ground and heard a voice, but here's the critical point. Paul didn't recognize the voice immediately. He asked, "Who are you, Lord?" The voice responded, "I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting." Acts 9:4-5. At that moment, the revelation Paul had been waiting for came in a form he never expected. God didn't speak to him in the way he anticipated, and it took a moment for him to recognize what was happening. The truth was there, but Paul's eyes were not yet opened. It wasn't until he was blinded by the light and led to the city that his spiritual eyes were fully opened, revealing the path God had prepared for him. The same can happen in our lives. We often wait for God to speak in the dramatic and the extraordinary, but he often speaks in ways that require us to be humble, patient, and willing to receive the message in its true form. The answer you've been looking for may already be in front of you, but it takes a shift in perspective to recognize it. This is why it's crucial to remain open to God's voice in all circumstances. Sometimes the biggest revelations come in the moments we least expect, through people we wouldn't normally listen to, or in situations we might dismiss as insignificant. In those moments, we must ask ourselves, am I willing to open my heart and see God's hand at work, even in the quiet and subtle things? The truth is that God is constantly speaking to us. It's not that he's absent or distant, it's that we might be too distracted or focused on the wrong things to hear him. The invitation is always there for us to tune in, to align our hearts with his, and to be open to the small whispers that carry the weight of eternal truth. Consider the times in your life when you missed an opportunity because you weren't looking in the right direction. Perhaps you felt stuck or uncertain, waiting for a sign, but the sign was already there, waiting for you to recognize it. Now is the time to realign your focus and open your heart to the ways God is trying to reach you. Reflect on this. What if the breakthrough you've been praying for has already arrived, but you need to adjust your perspective to see it? If this resonated with you, I encourage you to comment, "I will see with new eyes." It's not just a statement, it's a declaration of faith that you are willing to look at your life with fresh perspective, ready to see the answers God has already placed before you. This revelation isn't just about recognizing the signs, it's about preparing your heart to accept them. It's about being spiritually awake, alert, and willing to let go of preconceived expectations. The truth is, the moment of divine clarity is not always loud, it's often quiet and subtle, but if you are paying attention, it can change everything. Are you ready to receive the revelation that has been waiting for you? Open your eyes, open your heart, and prepare to receive the fullness of what God is doing in your life. You've journeyed through this revelation, step by step, opening your heart to the truth that God has been guiding you all along. You've seen that the answers you've sought were never out of reach. They were always right in front of you, but it required a shift in perspective, a deepening of faith, and a willingness to listen closely. Now, as we come to the end of this message, I want to pause for a moment and honor the space you've entered. You have stayed until the end, and that alone is a powerful sign of your commitment to hear from God. Not many people will make it this far. It's easy to get distracted, to leave before the final revelation, but you've chosen to stay, and that decision speaks volumes about your faith, your hunger for the truth, and your readiness to embrace the transformation that comes from fully trusting in God's plan for your life. You are part of something sacred, something rare, because those who stay until the end are the ones who are truly ready to receive what God is doing. As you stand at the threshold of this new understanding, I want to ask you, what is it that God has revealed to you today that you didn't see before? Perhaps it's a new insight, a fresh perspective, or a renewed sense of hope. Whatever it is, hold it close to your heart. This moment, this truth, is a gift from God, and it's yours to carry forward. And now, as we close, I invite you to make a declaration of faith. This word is my answer. By commenting this, you are acknowledging that you've heard from God, that this message has touched you, and that you're ready to move forward with confidence, trusting in the guidance He's already provided. This is more than just a comment. It's a symbolic step in your spiritual journey, a way of declaring that you're actively engaging with the divine truth that has been shared with you. But the journey doesn't end here. God's work in your life continues. This video was just one part of a much larger plan He is unfolding in your life, and you are being called to walk in that plan every day. So, I encourage you to share this message with someone who might need it. You may not know it, but your simple act of sharing this video could be the very thing that changes someone's life, someone who needs to hear exactly what you've heard today. Before you go, I ask you to take a moment to reflect. Don't rush off. Sit in silence for a few seconds, allowing the truth of this message to sink in. Let it settle deep in your soul. And as you sit there listening to the music and speaking quietly to God in your heart, know that He is near. He is speaking to you, and He is guiding you every step of the way. This is not just about watching a video. This is about being part of a living, breathing community of believers who are committed to hearing God's voice and following His direction. When you subscribe to this channel, you're not just adding another number to the list. You're becoming a vital part of this community, a community that is resisting the noise of the world and staying faithful to the call of God. If this channel is a flame, you are the oil that keeps it burning. So, as you go about your day, remember that God's presence is with you. It's not in the big, dramatic moments. It's in the quiet, intimate spaces where you allow Him to speak. Keep your heart open, your spirit receptive, and your eyes ready to see the signs He has already placed in your life. I leave you with this final thought. You are not alone. God is with you always. Take this truth with you, carry it in your heart, and let it shape your days ahead. Thank you for being here, for being part of this sacred moment. May God continue to reveal His will for you, and may you always hear His voice, leading you down the path He has set before you. Take a moment in silence now, just you and God. Let the stillness speak.